I mention this is this, in particular, Charles, because you raised something from the Maaseh Hashem. That's why I attached it. And you've sent a note round to various people. That's why I thought we'd start with that, because it's a fascinating piece in the Maaseh Hashem. I've sent attachments.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see this. This is the great, as he mentions here, Rabbi Lezer Ashkenazi, the son of Rabbi Elia Haroife.
Peter.
And he lived at the time, actually he died in 1586. So the time of the greats, you know, the Rabbi Yosef Karo, the time of the Ramah, and as actually he's buried in Krakow. So clearly time of the Ramah or the Marshal, as I say, more than 400 years ago. I was talking about 440 years ago now. And he wrote a wonderful Pirushim. And the one I want to look at, because you raised this, Charles, was about Makas Bechoros. Now, if you look, have you got it? You can't hear me? Malcolm, you can't hear?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry, Malcolm, we can't hear you.
Oh, right, Malcolm, sorry.
Malcolm?
Yeah, hello. Yeah,
you say you can't hear me?
No, you just went mute for a second, that's all.
Sorry, interrupt. I muted everybody, but if you want to speak, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Right, so now have a look at page 16 on that's the second attachment. And the most amazing piece here, where the Maaseh Hashem.
What attachment? Sorry, what attached?
I gave you 3. I gave you 5 attachments.
Attached to what?
To the invite for today's.
Oh, I didn't.
I think Harvey must have sent to you. Harvey sent you an about how to clock in. Did everybody get that?
Yeah.
Oh dear. You did. It gave you the Gemara. It gave you Daf Vov on the base, and 3 other attachments.
Yeah, everybody got it.
Everybody got it. Good. Well, I'll read out what it says, Malcolm. Don't worry if you haven't got it, because otherwise you could have printed it off. It deals with the, as Charles will know, it was dealing with Makas Bechoros. And it's very interesting, because one of the points mentioned about Makas Bechoros was Atem lo seitzeu ish mi Pesach beisai ad boiker. Don't go out all night, it says, until the morning. That's the point. I'm looking now also in Parshas Bo, and then if we move now to where it says Perek Yud Zayin, have you got Perek Yud Zayin? Robbie should have muted. Peter, could you mute?
Yes, thank you.
One of our friends.
Robert.
Yeah, that's good. He's answering the doorbell. Have a look at Perek Yud Zayin, the top of Perek Yud Zayin. I don't know if you can see that specifically. Perek Yud Zayin. Mashu hasofik hamafursum, the well-known doubt and question, lachol, to everybody. Everybody's busying themselves with this question on Makas Bechoros, which was the following. Remember, the blood was placed, the lintels and on top. The beginning of Perek Yud Zayin on the attachment, if you people got it. The Inyan hapsicha ala botim. And as we know, it's called Pesach. One of the reasons Hashem passed over, as we say, Passover. Hashem passed over the houses where there was the blood on the doorpost and top of the lintel. Fourth line of Perek Yud Zayin, if you've got it in front of you. It says, Im heyos muskum. We all know, as we mentioned in the Haggadah, shehoisa Makas Bechoros al yad HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmai. Hashem himself. Kamoshe Dorosho, as we said, you remember the Pasuk? I've got the Haggadah in front of me here, actually in the Siddur. Remember it says here, V'ovarti be'eretz Mitzrayim, I will pass be'eretz Mitzrayim, b'alaylu hazeh, v'hi kesi, I will smite b'chor Mitzrayim. So Hashem himself, and remember what we say in the Haggadah, Ani v'lo sarav, not an angel, but Hashem himself, b'chvoid v'atzmo, would be smiting the Egyptians. Okay? But it's very interesting, because if you look in that parsha in Bo, the very next pasuk says that if you place the blood, then v'lo yiyeh negef lemashchis b'hakosi be'eretz Mitzrayim. Therefore, the one attacking the mashchis will not cause any harm when he's smiting be'eretz Mitzrayim. So, although in the Haggadah we talk about Hashem causing makas b'choros himself, there's another pasuk which says v'lo yitein hamashchis, not allowing the mashchis. Mashchis sounds like there's a shaliach from Hashem who's causing the deaths in Mitzrayim. Yeah. V'lo yitein hamashchis. Keep going down. So the overall question, I'm now picking up the second paragraph where it starts avol, if you've got the second paragraph. Do you have that? Some people? In my attachment. Avol. So we've got a problem here. First of all, if Hashem is doing the killing of the firstborn himself, why do you need the blood on the doorpost? He says, I will see the blood, and therefore the mashchis will not be allowed to cause any death in Mitzrayim. Well, if Hashem is doing it, Hashem can do that himself. He doesn't need the blood to be owned. I won't touch this house, number one. The second question is, what is this mashchis? The translation of mashchis is the one causing the harm. There wasn't someone, I wouldn't say a person. There was no mashchis, it was Hashem himself. Now, if you've got it in front of you, Perek Yud Zayin, it's the second paragraph. People can see that? Okay, everybody? If you've got it. Avonadati niyisyashvu kol asfeikas hadizkorin ba'ofen nochen kipshuto shel ksupim. According to I've got a very simple, straightforward way of explaining about makas b'choros. And this is the point you raised, Charles, which you raised yourself, yeah? Okay, Charles? Ki ha-mashchis hoyo mashchis mamush. The one causing the trouble in Mitzrayim, it was noigev. Now this is the crucial words. Umachnis ipush avir. A foul type of avir. It was in, what should we say, the air? Ipush avir. Sam, you're probably familiar with the words ipush. Ipush normally means, they say, if something's gone moldy. Maybe lihitafesh, you know the word? Ipush means something's going moldy. There was something in the air. Umaknis ipush ha'avir, b'chol mi shoyo moitze. Anyone coming in contact in the air, that was the mashchis in Mitzrayim. Fascinating. Ki kavaniten reshus lamashchis. That was the mashchis. The mashchis was the germs in the air in Mitzrayim, causing trouble. V'rov Mitzrayim honu nigofim. Fascinating. Anyone that was caught outside was caught by this mashchis, which was in the avir, in the air. Hoyu nigofim b'magefa. This was this magefa, this plague, literally a plague. Avlo mesu, but they didn't die. This magefa just caused this illness. But what happened to we meant to have the firstborn dying? Says the Pirish, Rakha B'choros, only the B'choros died. How come? Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu hayohu ba'atzmo ha'horig Esau. So there were two things taking place. There was the plague in Mitzrayim, which was in the air. This ipush avir, that was the point you raised, Charles. It was in the air. I know you mentioned this word contagious. The Maaseh Hashem doesn't mention the word contagious, but it was just in the air, contagious. If you translate contagious being just in the air, it's in the atmosphere. That was what was happening. But death only came from Hashem himself. And the reason for that was quite clear, because it was only...
Sorry,
Yes.
what was the purpose of the foul air then? I mean, if the
Carry on, you'll soon see. You'll soon see. Ulakach hutzrach ois dam al hamashkoif. If there was blood, because it was in the air, it was in the atmosphere. If there was blood around the house, ba'al shtei hamzuzos, she ois besimen la malach hamashchis, for that malach, the mashchis, the plague, all above normal understanding, it would not enter that house. So if there was the blood surrounding the house, this plague did not enter that house. So therefore, every other house, this plague entered, and that's why you'll find there's a pasuk that says the Mitzri and the Egyptians are saying, Kulonu Mesim, we're all about to die. Why were they all about to die? They saw that the firstborns, and it was only Hashem could really differentiate who was the firstborn. Like, for example, you could have a lady who may have 3 firstborns, depending, of course, who the fathers were. So it was only Hashem who would differentiate and decide who was the firstborn, whether from the mother or the father, and that firstborn was killed. So in a household, when there was nothing surrounding, no blood surrounding the house, that house, the plague would have entered, Hashem would have killed the firstborn too, and everybody else in the house would be saying, oh no, the firstborns died, maybe the same thing's going to happen to us too. And that's in the next paragraph here. That's what it says. There was great crying. It's true. There was no household without a dead person in the house. And he says, continues this pirish, V'choshvu, third line from the end, Shekula Mason. They see the firstborn dying. They see plenty of other people dying. They didn't even know they were firstborn. The people themselves may not even have realized if their father was not there, outside marriage. If the father was someone else not known to them, there were people dying in the households, and therefore everybody's got the plague. Avalo Mace, next page, Rak Kol Habachar. Only the Bachar was the one that would die. That's very good. I'm reading the next line here. Es Hadam, Hashem himself, Ufosachti Aleichem, I will pass over, and there will be no death to the firstborn. And also, V'lo yihye vochem negef lamashchis, there will be no plague in that house that would affect that house. Ki bi'er ma'oid hadvorim, beautiful. Ki apsicho pirusha shebamokam ha-mitzvah hoisa shchina. Against this atmosphere of the plague, there was the Shekhinah in that household, which was there because the person had performed the mitzvah of Pesach. There was blood surrounding the door, and therefore the mashchis did not enter, and therefore nobody suffered from the plague. Beautiful. But not in the Beis HaMitzri, because in the Beis HaMitzri there was no mitzvah has been performed. Therefore, the mashchis, which was this ipush avir, would enter this household. That's what Beis Yisrael shashchina hoysa niris shuruya, because of the korban. Lohoyu reshus lamalach. In other words, it was counter against this atmosphere. The ipush avir, there was the shechina in this household because of the mitzvahs that they had been performing, and therefore there was no reshus lamalach likones, and that's where it says v'lo yevochem negef. There will be no negef once you place the blood around the house. There will be no plague. And not only that, of course, no one will die because death anyway is only carried out by Hashem. So that's it. Charles, you raised this Maaseh Hashem, and the same idea we see. Yeah, you're happy? You can wave and nod. Yes, good. So there we have it. So this idea about the contagious that you mentioned, not so much contagious passing on from individual to individual, but it was in this ipush avir, as I mentioned here, in the air, in the atmosphere, and that was causing the Mageifor, which didn't kill anybody. The killing, as we see in the Haggadah, is, as we see, Ani v'lo malach, Ani v'lo sorof. He can see, I'll be the one killing, because I, Hashem, am the only one who really can differentiate between who is an individual who is a firstborn, maybe from the mother, maybe from a father, and therefore I will be killing the firstborn, but there will still be this Mageifor, and this is what you're referring to, this plague that was affecting everybody besides the Jews. And that's why, of course, the Pasuk says, don't go out of the house. Lord say, don't go out of the house, because this Mageifor, the plague will be in the atmosphere everywhere, unless you're in a home which is surrounded by the Shekhinah, which comes because you perform the mitzvah of Pesach, which is very beautiful, and of course has some similarities to hopefully, yeah, Malcolm's got a question.
Yeah, two things. Well, one is a comment. I mean, it must have been a very quick contagion, isn't it? There was no incubation period.
No, absolutely.
One point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the second point is, I'm confused. It says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmo, yet in several times it said,
that's exactly what he's answering. There's a mashchitz which is bringing the plague, but Hashem is killing the firstborn.
I see. So but the blood on the doorpost was to prevent both entering.
Well, Hashem was killing the firstborn anyway, but you're right, it would prevent the plague entering the house.
Okay.
And therefore people suffering from that plague. That wasn't deathly. What was Hashem killing the firstborn. But to avoid the plague, have the blood below you, and that's why it says the possible below yitain, the possible lo yevochem negef lamashchis.
Yeah.
See, when I smite and kill be'eretz Mitzrayim. So beautiful, and they both fit together, and also some relevance, talking about the plague and the in the atmosphere, as it were. So that's the point, Charles, about the ipush avir that you were referring to when you sent me this note. A beautiful shot from Rab Maiseh Hashem, Rab Eliezer Ashkenazi, the son of the Dr. Eliyahu Aroife. They're buried in Krakow. Anybody's been to Krakow? He's buried there, let's say, with a great Rov, and wrote others for him too. So with that, just to answer up your question, I know that's takes some time, but I hope that answers your question, Charles, and explains inside the actual text of the Maaseh Hashem. Is that all right, Charles?
I do a quick, very, very quick.
Say we can't hear you, Charles. He picks up a phone. We can't hear you, sadly. But he's happy. He's waving. Okay? Right, shall we move on? Okay, shall we ready to move on, gentlemen? Right. Malcolm's got a question there? No. If anybody's got a...
Well, it was just a very quick observation. I was just wondering whether the author you mentioned
yes,
was, in proximity of a plague era.
Not necessarily. Well, maybe there were plagues at that time. I don't know. What was the situation where there were plagues? May well be. I don't know. I don't know answer that question. But that's a beautiful way of explaining this, and especially that wording that he uses there, ipush avir. So it's in the air. This plague, and that was the mashchis that was causing all the harm, but not the death. The death was specific.
Can the doctors enlighten us as to at what point knowledge of transmission through the air was something medicine knew about?
No comment? No.
Trump, he's the expert.
Who's that?
We should ask Donald Trump. He's the expert on this matter.
No, okay, fine enough. We'll have to bring him in next time. Let's go back now. So I say, because Charles sent that round, I thought it would be of interest to go through it. But let's go back now.
The serious point, Sam, is probably within the last 100 years that it's been known of transmission through respiratory, in the air. I mean, it's.
So he was well ahead of his time with this peush then.
Yeah, I think 400 or 500 years ago, as far as I would consider, it wouldn't be known. I mean, Jenner, who knew about smallpox, was in the 1700s or 1800s.
And Lister invented antiseptics, and Semmelweis told people to wash their hands, and the Labour Ward.
Yeah, but that was
about 100 years. It was in the 18th century, 9th century.
I'd just be reading a whole history of vaccination, but the vaccination was Jenner. But
Yeah.
you have a long history of centuries that they knew that disease could spread from person to person, and villages were cut off. As you know, Eyam in Britain was cut off many hundred years ago. So it was known even in the time, over 1,000 years ago, it was known that a disease spread from person to person.
So in the time of who, Simon? In whose time?
Over 1,000 years ago. I mean, there was a long article I was reading about history of vaccination, but the actual question of infection, people were aware, obviously, that it spread from person to person, and they could cut off a whole population and hence immunize the rest of the population, keep the rest of the population apart. So they were aware, whether or not they were aware they weren't aware of germs or anything of that nature, but they were aware of the nature of the spread.
Well, listen, in the Bible, the leprosy was so contagious, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it's contagious, yeah. But yeah, this wording of his is just amazing. Umachnis, this magefa, as you can read it here, ipush ha'avir, b'chol misha hayamoitze. The germs were everywhere. If you were in contact with those germs, then you'd pick up this magefa. That's his loshon, which is quite amazing. So I leave that with you to think about. You've got the, hope you can see it. Let's go back to Rosh Hashanah. We're at Daf Vov, I think. Yeah, everybody's got the Gemara. If you haven't got the Gemara, I attached it to be so you can read it there. Otherwise, you may have Gemaras. We are towards the end of Daf Vov Amud Aleph. Let's have a look. The beginning of the line is Beficha. 8 lines up. Do you have 8 lines up? 8 lines up in the Gemara. It says Beficha. And if you remember last time, we brought another posuk, going through a whole posuk. Motzis Rosecha Tishma V'Asisa. And the posuk finished up Beficha, and it's connected to the posuk of Bal Ta'ach, which is closing down, hopefully, towards the end of this Bal Ta'ach, although there's another onward still, about Bal Ta'ach, which was delaying. When a person promises to bring a korban, promises to deliver, then they must do so. And remember, you've got this deadline and do things immediately, or do things at least with the Sholosh Regalim. One of the things mentioned there was Beficha, with your mouth, and we learned from that extra word which was in the posuk. There's a posuk Yotzo Mipid Stokka posuk in Yeshaya. Of course, that extra word. Have you got the where it says Beficha Zut Stokka? This is quite important. Coming up to all charitable donations. Omar Rova Utstokka Machayiv Alo La'alta. When it comes to tzedakah, we were previously talking about, and the rest of that brisa that we mentioned, a whole list of things, whether it's korbanos and achatos and an osham, that have put their rules of Bal Ta'ach apply. When it comes to tzedakah, a person is machayiv la'alta, immediately. You know, la'alta l'chaim tovim l'sholem. There's your word la'alta. You're probably familiar with that, Sylvain. La'alta l'chaim tovim l'sholem there. Rosh Hashanah words. Yeah, la'alta l'chaim tov. There's your la'alta. U'tzedakah machayev alo la'alta. There you are machayev immediately. Now, why should that be? When it came to korbanos, you were given time. We spoke about whether it's 1 Yom Tov or 3 Yom Tovim. Why should it be in the case when it comes to tzedakah, you're machayev immediately? So it says the Gemara Matama Daha Daho Kaima Aniyim. There's nothing that you don't need to go up to Yerushalayim, which people didn't necessarily, could be expensive business, going up to Yerushalayim. Therefore, the Torah gives you, when you're going up in a regel, whether 1 Yom Tov, 2, 3 Yom Tovim, on that occasion, fulfill your vows when it comes to various korbanos. But when it comes to tzedakah, you can do that where you are. It's got nothing to do with coming to Yerushalayim, coming to the Beis HaMikdash. You can just hand out your tzedakah. So that's the reason why. Kaimei aniyim. Because there are aniyim available, sadly, and therefore, we'll have to have a look at the halacha about this in one moment. Therefore, because there are aniyim around, therefore a person is mechuyev immediately. Once a person said they will give that tzedakah, then they should give that immediately. Says the Gemara Pshita, obviously. Says the Gemara, no. Mal the same, you might think, even the binyoni the korbanos kasiva, even though it's true, when it comes to giving charity, it's got nothing to do with Yerushalayim. Yes, there are a lot of worthy causes in Jerusalem, but there are other places you can give tzedakah. But I might have thought, because this idea beficha, which is this pasuk, one of the words mentioned when it's discussing Balta Acher, is in the whole parsha dealing with korbanos, I might have thought that the same rule would apply. Albeit you could give your tzedakah immediately if there was a poor person, you could give it immediately, but you'd still be allowed a certain amount of time, and maybe the time frame was going to be the same as you'd find with other korbanos. Continuing the Gemara, Ad Ovre Alo Gimel Gregolim Korbanos. I might have thought that it had the same ruling as with other korbanos. Although the logic might be different, but nevertheless, as there's a pasuk telling us this word beficha, that there's a rule of delaying, a person must not delay his donation that was promised. Komash malon. Hosom de talinu rachmona birgolim. It's true. All the pasuk's telling me is there is a rule about delaying. When it comes to korbanos, that will be linked to regolim. When you're coming up to Yerushalayim, that's the occasion you should fulfill your vow. You could do it earlier too. That's the chiddush he's telling us. I might have thought that even with tzedakah, there was a time period, and you can take your time till you pay up. So from there we learn that no, dohoshchichi aniyim. As there are aniyim around, you should really pay up the tzedakah immediately. Now it's very interesting. Have a look. Have people got, which Gemara have you got? Are people using this Gemara or no? You are people got this? Well, all right.
I got Steinsaltz.
Let me read something to you. From the, I'm using Mark's set. Actually, it's my own, but it's a similar to the ones that Sam and Mark donated. But hopefully, we look forward to using them Makorov. And at the back of that, I've got the Pirush of the Run.
Sammy, not Sam.
Oh, Sammy, yeah. Well, yeah, the true. Okay, very good, very good. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's quite true. Sammy in the corner there, and Mark, and it's there. It's very interesting. I'll read what it says. Here we are, and it's very interesting because it looks like there was something missing in the Tosfos that we've got on Daf Dalet. Turn to Daf Dalet, gentlemen. Have a look at the 1, 2, 3, 4. The sixth Tosfos was down the page on Daf Daled Amud Aleph. If you've got Daf Daled there, it was not attached. But if you've got a Gemara, you'll have Daf Daled. Under the word V'hacharomim. Have you got the word V'hacharomim on Daf Daled Amud Aleph? We don't need to go on that. That's things that you make a chayrim, you say they belong to Hekdush. But this is very interesting, Rabbeinu Tam here. Look at this. Rabbeinu Tam Postak, the tzedakah shepoiskin lite biyad gabai. So in other words, it sounds like what we were talking about now was where you said and you pledged to give an oni, poor people, then you should give that immediately. What happens if you promise to give it to the Gaba of the shul? What happens then? So he says the following: you'll have a trouble there. You must hand it over as soon as you can to the Gaba. Interesting. You can't give an Aveira to the poor Gaba who's just collecting the money. You made a vow or you made a promise that you will give money to the Gaba, your Mishabera. You promised to give it to the Gaba. You therefore have this commitment to give it to the Gaba, but you cannot place on the Gaba a commitment. Hopefully he'll do his best, but as he says here, the Gaba, he will not fall foul if he delays. You might if you're delaying. But so don't worry if you want to take up the position of a Gaba, you won't have trouble if you're donating and ensuring that the money is spread and distributed. But this is very interesting. Look at the last part. Avomashe odom noider, and here the wording slightly different. I've got here noider that should be biyad atzmei likashe yirtzer. A person says to himself, I am now separating out money which I intend to distribute. Maybe he's gone to a particular charity and is doing it through Achisomach or one of the others, and he's donated money and said, I'd like to use that money, especially if it could be some tax, lots of tax advantages. He's getting the tax back, so he's given that money over. How long has he got to actually distribute the money that he's handed over to the charity? So he says here, or let's leave that aside. A person may do that at home. They've got certain funds, they've set it aside somewhere, and they've said, yeah, that money I'm setting aside to give out and distribute. And he says to himself, I'm specially leaving there. When I fancy, I will give it. Then, Eino babal ta'acher. There, clearly, he made a stipulation. A person, I suppose, would think that, but if necessary, I will distribute it as and when. Then a person does not fall foul. It's only when he says, I'm giving this money for stock and I will be handing it out, then he should give it out at the first opportunity he has. So that's very important.
Is there a difference depending on whether or not he's actually decided on what tzedakah to give it to? I mean, if you give it to Achisomach, that's
yes.
To a vehicle.
Yes.
If I say, right, I'm going to give it to Kisharon.
Yes.
I would have thought if he say I'm going to give it to Kisharon, then that should...
Absolutely. That's exactly right. If he says I'm giving it to a particular tzedakah, then he should pay up as soon as he can. If, however, he's done something like Achisomach, or he could do the same thing at home, saying, look, I've set aside these funds, as and when I get people knocking at the door, or I get all these charities coming on the way, I will then distribute. That's exactly the point. Then clearly he said as and when, and therefore he will not fall foul of this. But if he's otherwise, but he said he will give the tzedakah to a particular charity, then he really should do so as soon as he can.
In terms of the distinction between giving the charity and the korbanos as
yes,
being governed by the regalim, the small print in Schottenstein points out that the korbanos are linked to the regalim in terms
that's
of.
what we said. Absolutely,
Yeah.
that's what we said.
Whereas
In other words,
yeah.
that's the point. Because they're linked to the it's a korban in Yerushalayim. Therefore, Hashem had said, "Fine, I'm not forcing you to come tomorrow to Yerushalayim. You may live up north there in where it is, up in the Canary. You may not want to come down to Yerushalayim." Quite right. Quite right, Sam. So therefore, the Torah gives you an opportunity. You're coming for Ola Regel anyway. 1, 2, third opportunity. That's when you should do it. Whereas Stocker, you can give the Stocker right here. Korban, of course, you can't offer it up in the Kinneret, but you can when you come. So quite right. They're good points. Yeah, which I think we said. And therefore, that's the distinction between the two. And the only difference is the Gemara thought that maybe because it's learnt out from this word Beficha, albeit that. If you like, the svara, the logic may be different. I might have thought that still maybe the rules are still the same. So now Robert tells us, no, they're not. It's in that parsha telling me, don't delay, but the time frame is different than with other, say with korbanos. But clearly, when one should be paying off as soon as possible. I do know there are various people around. But, once they're made to Shabbat, they will make their, that much of Shabbos, they'll be down around paying off and ensuring, or certainly Sunday morning, let's say, making sure that they've made a Mishaberach, they promise to give the money, so to hand it over while they've got their needs, and therefore don't delay. There's no reason to delay really, and therefore clearly that's what we're saying here.
Sorry, Norman. In Rosh Hashanah, la'alta really means instantly, doesn't it? Immediately.
Yes.
So when there's a significant concern of when am I going to be Baal Ta'achad, to instantly is unrealistic. So I've made an Adover on Shabbos morning. I can't give my tzedakah on Shabbos morning. From your
yeah, I mean you're quite right. Clearly, la'alta would mean as soon as you can, rather than as opposed to the sholosh regolim or the one regel, la'alta means immediately, but it doesn't mean immediately, it's Shabbos after all, it means as soon as you can.
And then is there, because we're talking about being over a significant problem here, if I'm going to be Baal Ta'achar in Tzedakah,
yes.
Do we define it more rigorously? So it's unusual to have something of halachic ramification which is very vague.
You mean, what does it mean immediately?
Yeah, so normally when we say immediately, and it's like the bird that's found between the dovecote and 1 foot inside and 1 foot outside. So
yes.
We're very particular to make limits and to define things. To just have a very vague term, I know it's a very nice idea, but presumably there are halachic ramifications to it.
Yeah, let me tell you, I'll read now the point you've raised, is good. I want to look at this run. If you've got Rabbeinu Nissim, you may not have it in those Gemaras, but you have it here. And he says the following, and this is crucial, because he explains the word of Rabbeinu Tam in that Tosfos. It looks like he had some extra words. And those words do appear actually in Shulchan Aruch. And listen to this. I'm not putting off people paying off their charitable donations immediately, but he says the following. I don't know if you've got the run, I don't know if you've got the Gemara with the Rabbeinu Nissim at the back. He says, and note the difference. Rabbeinu Tam was asked on Stocker, she'onu regilim lido b'beis hakneses, im over miyad, because they're aniyim, right? If a person says, so they're clearly your la'alta, Anthony, will be, if you say immediately, it means the first person knocks at the door. If a person sets aside money for poor people, it means the first opportunity, you should be giving the money away to poor people. But what happens if it's for shul, or over beisenu, im over miyad ki kaimu anim, and he answered, the kiven sha'onu noidrim ledatenu, and that was the point that David made. Clearly, you're giving over and you say, look, it's for poor people, but I'm not specifically saying which ones. He says the following: if I would have given it over to the Gizbar, like we've got in Tosfos, but slightly differently. He's saying just like if I gave it over to the treasurer, of course the treasurer is not going to be over. You can't give him the avera of delaying. After all, he's not the one who made the vow. Similarly, when a person makes a neder, he's doing it as if he was now a treasurer. And therefore he's saying in all instances, a person would be allowed to distribute as and when he pleases. It's only if he says, I'm going to give it to specifically, and he says, the first opportunity, then that will be la'alta. I'll read also, this is the crucial bit. So the question is, after we've said all this, it sounds like the person has got a bit of leeway here, because a person's setting aside funds and giving it as and when. So this word la'alta that we've just used in the Gemara, it doesn't seem to be relevant. What we're saying here is, when a person says they're giving stock and they are like a treasurer, and therefore they will have their own time, what's this la'alta? So he says the following, this is interesting. Sober Rabbeinu Tam, Dechika Omar Robert Stocker Machayev la'alta, Machayev losei slave la'alta la'chalka la'aniyim. He's got to do something about it. Set aside the funds now. Put the money somewhere. Yeah? Lefi maros einov. If, however, he's goma badatu likpots if, however, he says, well, I'll think about separating the money some other time, that's the problem. So what he said very specifically, according to the way the Run is learning, when it says la'alta, it doesn't mean necessarily alta paying it out, but la'alta means doing something about it. Once a person makes a neder, they should, obviously it's Shabbos, he can't do that, but otherwise he should put his hand in his pocket, he should make that donation. If it's to Achi Somach, he should make that donation, set aside the funds and place them somewhere. He's got to do something about it immediately. That's what la'alta means here. And that changes things quite substantially. I'll just tell you very quickly, where it says here, back to Dav Vov, if you see the little ches down the side, no, it's the Zayin. Can you see the Zayin when we said, Robert said, Stocker Machayev la'alta? The little Zayin takes me on the side to Yoredeh Reish Nun Zayin Gimel. Now, funnily enough, I've just got that here. Reish Nun Zayin Gimel. If you go to read, I'll read what the way the Shulchan Aruch explains this. Reish Nun Zayin, 257. Anthony, this may answer your questions, I hope. Reish Nun Zayin Gimel. Hatstocker, he said the following. Can't actually see you, but I can only see 9 people at once here. Not more, I'm afraid. That's the iPad. Anyway, Hatstocker Harihi Bichlal Hanadorin. I'm reading the Shulchan Aruch. It's the final word. If a person says he wants to give a selah to tzedakah, chayev litna la'aniyim miyad. Ve'im icher over b'balta acher, shari biyodoi litei miyad. He said he's going to give it to poor people, therefore he should give it to poor people. That's only if the aniyim are matsuyim. So he's got aniyim knocking at the door, he's got an opportunity to give it. What happens if there are no aniyim? There are no poor people around. Then nobody's knocking at the door. So mafrish umaniach ad sheyinso aniyim. He should separate it immediately. Doesn't have to look for the aniyim, but he should separate it. That's the crucial thing he's got to do immediately. Separate the funds. Says the Ramah, Ramosha Islis, if you've got stocker funds, which he could distribute immediately. In other words, he's giving it just to the treasurer. Very interesting. In that case, when he's got a demand, as it were, he doesn't have to distribute it. He should give it over to the treasurer, and then it will be up to the treasurer to distribute. He doesn't have to ensure that it's going to be distributed. He should tell the gabbai how much he's promised to give. And it would really be interesting. There's quite a rule here about the treasurer. The treasurer should be pushing people to ensure they've actually paid up. That is one of their jobs. Right? Yes. He says, yeah, interesting. The ruling seems to be, I need to be careful here because otherwise everybody would just back off. That it's very much depends on the demand from the person who made the Mishaberach, strictly speaking. So it's very much on the treasurer to ensure. So the bottom line seems to be, according to the way we're learning in the run, that the point would be, he says here, in the case where there are no aniyim, then we've said here there's no rule about paying. He just put the money aside. And you will not fall foul even if they're 3 regalim. So the bottom line is this. When a person makes and set, what he must do, if he said he's going to give stock, he's got to do something about the stocker, which means at least la'alta as soon as he can, obviously, the first opportunity, a person should be putting his hand in his pocket, separating out the funds. If he's promised to give to a particular stocker, he should do so. If he said it's for aniyim, he should ensure that it's for the aniyim. If they're specific aniyim, specific poor people, he's promised to give to this particular charity. Yeah, and that should be done immediately, not wait until the next Yom Tov. That should happen immediately. However, in the normal case where a person says he's just separating funds, which he will use as and when, that clearly means exactly that. What he should do, he's promised to separate out the funds. He should do that immediately. But as far as the distribution, he should distribute, and he can distribute as and when he pleases. But the main thing is, as soon as he can, he should at least set aside the funds. But if he gets he's promised, he had made a mishaberach, as I say, strictly speaking, the person should pay up as soon as they can. But certainly, once he gets the request from the treasurer or the secretary of the shul, then he really has to pay up immediately. Yes, I think David's got a question there.
Is the concept of tzedakah limited to aniyim, to giving money to aniyim?
Not necessarily. I mean, interestingly, we're constantly talking about aniyim in this case. Whether you would really classify an institution as a tzedakah, we're really not talking about that. Interesting. We normally always talk about where the needs are there, the needs for individuals. We seem to be focusing very much on aniyim. Although interesting, even for a Beis HaKnesses, it's not for the upkeep of the Beis HaKnesses. It seems to be that the treasurer knew people who needed the funds, and therefore you're giving it to them. A bit like Kimcha de Pischa, which a lot of people have. It's like Kemach for Yom Tov. You hand it over to the shul, and they then distribute on your behalf. So it's interesting. Strictly speaking, we have not mentioned that.
But because it talks about tzedakah in the Gemara, do you have to give tzedakah immediately? And then the answer is yes, because of poor people.
Yes. So you're right. It seems to be talking very much around tzedakah. I know we classified tzedakah of lots of things. We have to worry about what's classified under the commission, charitable commission. No, we are looking very much. It's all around aniyim. Now you may tell me that under these institutions are very much like that because, of course, they're headed by and they need the funds, not just for the institution, but for the people who are actually delivering and their shiurim, etc., and the people running. So they will all come under that category, but not just for a building. I don't know, according to this, whether donating money to build a shul Whether that would be called a tzedakah, not according to our Gemara. It's a wonderful thing to do, great. But when a person promises to give money for a shul, whether that would be classified as a tzedakah in this instance, I don't know. But again, if once you've made a promise to do something, then you've always got this issue of keeping your word. But you're right, we are very much towards the aniyim being available rather than the institution needing the money.
There's the expression aniyei ilcha kodmin.
Yes, absolutely. We always talk about the aniyim, and that's because it looks like their needs are immediate. Now, you may tell me institutions as well, because if they haven't got the funds, they will pack up, and therefore they have to pay their tuition costs, etc., to the various individuals. So maybe that would come under that category. It would come under the classification. It would become under tzedakah. But clearly, as I say, many people would say once you've actually said something on a Shabbos to the do your best to try and pay off as soon as you can, rather than delay. But certainly, once you've had the request coming in that you made a mishaberach, then really you do have the obligation to pay up as soon as you can. We probably need to stop there. Just for one, I'm very interesting. Just start the next Gemara. And there, Rava's got a further statement. We'll clarify this a little bit more. Omar Rava, have you got it 5 lines up? Kiven she'ova olav regel echod over ba'aseh. This is going back now. If you look at Rashi, we are going back to korbanos. Have you got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up in the Gemara in Rashi? Over ba'aseh ala kod dichsib, and this is the point that Sam made. Uvoso shoma v'havesem shoma. When you come there to Yerushalayim, bring with you all that you promised to bring to Yerushalayim, which is talking about the korbanos, and therefore that's why they're linked together. Uvoso shom v'havesem. When are you coming there? When do you have to come there? You have to come there, of course, for Oila Regel. Of course, you can bring the korban as soon as you can, but what we're saying here, there's an assay. We've mentioned this point before, if you remember, a couple of pages earlier, a couple of dapim earlier, that as far as the positive side, so there are 2 things. There's a negative and a positive. The negative is lo sa'achel shalmai. Don't delay giving. Giving, not giving, it means fulfilling what you've said regarding korbanos. Don't delay. And that don't delay applies to tzedakah too, because we've got the word beficha. So beficha means whatever you utter from your mouth, don't delay. Okay? Especially if there's aniyim around, pay up immediately, or at least consider what you're going to do and set aside the funds, pay it off to the shul, etc. That's negative. Don't delay. There's another positive. What do I mean by a positive? A positive mitzvah, which says if you come, bring with you. So if you come and do not bring with you, you have not fulfilled your positive mitzvah of bringing with you the korban. Do you understand the difference? One is negative, don't delay. If you delay, you've fallen foul of not paying up immediately. There's another positive. When you come, bring it with you. And as far as that's concerned, there's only one. Everybody agrees there, because the pasuk says, uvosom v'havesem, when you come, bring with you. Only your first opportunity you should bring. So there are 2 things here. Even if we paskin that there are 3 Yom Tovim to fall foul of not delaying, the first Yom Tov is the Yom Tov which you've got the positive mitzvah to bring. And if you don't, you do not get the tick for bringing it on the first Yom Tov, what you're meant to do. As far as delaying, lo sa'achi, you haven't delayed yet because you've got 3 Yom Tovim. But as far as bringing is concerned, you've only got 1 Yom Tov, and after that, you've already not fulfilled your positive mitzvah. And on that, we're going to bring a very interesting case of what happened in the time of Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Papias perhaps we'll look at that next time. Where just have a look at that. Meisvei, hey, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Papayas, Avlad Shlomim. Someone promised to bring a Shlomim, and they actually pointed out which the animal was, and the animal gave birth. So what happens is the animal itself and the offspring must be brought. And first of all, that's one thing. He gave testimony, Sheikorev Shlomim. Not if a person says that they are going to offer this animal's a korban, he means not only the animal, the offspring which will come from it too. So if the female gives birth, then that will also. Now this is interesting. Omara Papayas, Ani Meid, I can give testimony. Shehoisolonu Porusha Zivche Shlomim. There was a para of Shlomim. Va'ochalnu b'Pesach. We ate it on Pesach. And guess what happened? Va'ochalnu v'loda Shlomim b'Chag. But it was Sukkos that we ate the offspring. Now clearly there's more than one, because what happens after Pesach? You've got Shavuos. So that's something we will have to focus on next time we'll be well and see how that ties in with this idea as the positive you've got to do immediately. You do not fall foul of the negative delaying. Lo sa'acher, don't delay. You've got 3 Yom Tovim for that. But the positive do immediately. So how come they let this over till Sukkot? They should have brought it in Shavuos. That is something we'll have to look at next time. Let me just conclude. We were talking before about this Maaseh Hashem. Something else which is similar time. I don't know if anybody came across the Mate Moshe. The Mate Moshe, I don't know if people remember from Knobovich's Chorei Levracha. He brought out, it hadn't been available for many years, and he brought it out again with wonderful notes. This is the Mate Moshe. Interesting, his name was Rav Moshe Mem Tov, inverted commas. Not inverted commas, hyphenated. Mem Tov is Mos. Interesting, you do find the word Mos used quite a lot. Mos actually stands for, normally, as he mentions here, someone who's giving out Torah, he mentions. That was his name. Machzik Torah or Marbitse Torah. So that was his name. And it ended up being a name, Mos. You do have people called Mr. Mos. So that's the name. Anyway, his name was Rav Moshe Mos. And he writes the following. He's actually got a wonderful pirush on Rashi, a super commentary on Rashi. Also died about 20 years after our Maaseh Hashem. So just this sefer was produced in the 1500s. And he writes the following. Beautiful point here. He says, he goes through davening in the morning. So he says, the Chazan starts Adon Olam. People think if Adon Olam is very nice. And wonderful Shiur. He says, Shiur Noeh U'Ma'uleh. What a beautiful song. What a beautiful Adon Olam. We will all have it beginning and end of davening, etc. U'Motzosi Kosuv. Kol Misha Mishavim Be'es Hascholas Adon Olam. Of course, the beginning of Adon Olam is saying exactly that. Adon Olam Hashem Olach Hashem is creator of the world, in control of everything, particularly today. It says here, Rabbi Yehuda HaChosid, Rabbi Hai Gaon and Rabbi Shrira Gaon say, we'll act as guarantors for you. If you appreciate the beginning of the Adon Olam, that your tefillah, it's a wonderful help for the tefillah to start off in this way with Adon Olam, with this concentration of Adon Olam, and say it's a wonderful way to start the tefillah, not just a sheer noise, as I say, wonderful songs. I'm sure, Malcolm, you've got several renditions you can give us of Adon Olam. But yeah, it's not just a wonderful song, he says. He says it's also a very powerful beginning to davening, because it sets the tone, Adon Olam, particularly the beginning of Adon Olam. Of course, they're wonderful. You've got the 13 main points there, mention of faith. But besides that, you've got that, and the idea of Adon Olam Hashem Olach, and he says that's a tremendous way to start off davening. And let's hope with concentration on tefillah, we've got a little bit more time. Rather than traveling around to shul. We're not going to shul, we haven't got a minyan sadly, but we do have an extra bit of time. If we put it to good use, let's hope with a bit more concentration that we look forward to good news and Basuras Tovas, as I say, and Refuas and Yeshuas all around, and we should meet and be well. So are you okay? Thank you, Peter, for the setting this up for us.